Welcome back, folks, to another episode of the Intuitive Websites Internet Marketing Podcast. Tom and I are going to talk about fraud and hacking. Let's just jump right into this, Tom. What's been going on with the world, obviously, of hacking? We've heard the Home Depots, the Targets, the Citibanks, all these major companies are getting hacked all the time. And then obviously website fraud, credit card fraud and everything is running amok. What types of things are they married together, fraud and hacking? Are they different? Are there ways that we can avoid both of those? Where should we start?
Well, let's start with the fact that there are two different things that happen. One is what we would call fraud, which means that there's some kind of transaction that is going to take place, and that transaction is fraudulent, and the person committing the fraud is trying to get some benefit, usually money, trying to get money or goods, right? They're stealing, basically. And that's one part. We'll call that fraud. The second part is hacking. And hacking is basically, we're going to define as someone attacking your website to do damage or harm to your website. And we're not always sure why they do this. A lot of times it's to promote their own company somehow in some weird way. But they're two different issues, but they're major problems, and they impact your website regardless if you're an e-commerce site or lead generation website. It doesn't matter. Fraud and hacking are happening. They're increasing all the time. A lot of times they come from overseas, and it's something that we have to be ready for. And what I wanted to do in this podcast is really give people examples of what we're seeing with our clients and what we're recommending to our clients to prevent this, because it is such a big problem. We can't possibly get into everything and all the different examples today, but we can talk about some of the common things that are happening and then ways to prevent that and be on the lookout for it.
Yeah, let's go there, because I mean we've got the big guys that we've heard in the news over the last year: Home Depot, Target. And then somebody who has got smaller websites, why should we be concerned if we're a small mom and pop business? I mean, really, what are hackers going to do with our website? And that's, I think, the struggle that a lot of entrepreneurs or small businesses think about it. It's like, we're small potatoes. What are you going to get? We don't store credit card numbers online. Who cares? It's kind of like you hack into the website. Well, what's going to happen? What are you seeing?
Well, I think that I'm going to get into that just a second. I think that the thing to think about is that preventing fraud and hacking is now just a part of what you have to do in web marketing. We spend a lot of time talking about marketing websites and getting results from websites, but now we're going to spend time on website prevention stuff. That's part of what you have to do. And catching these problems early is the best solution, because there's going to be new problems that come up that we're not even aware of yet, because these hackers and fraud people, they're getting so smart in what they do. So prevention and catching problems early is the way to go. If something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And one of the ways that it looks too good to be true is you get a nice big order on your e-commerce website, maybe for something you haven't sold in the past, and you think, oh my gosh, this is starting to move now. That's great. No, it's a red flag. You need to look into it. And then and as I said, it's not just e-commerce websites, but if you're a service provider, any kind of service provider, you're going to get fraudulent attacks from people as well. And it basically takes the shape of someone contacting you and saying they want to pay up front, but they want you to help paying their vendors or their suppliers. What's happening in web marketing is people are saying, we want to have a website built. We're going to pay you up front with the credit card, but out of that payment, would you mind paying this other party that's helping us as well? And if you trust somebody and you work with clients, I mean, if you're building websites, you usually work with contractors all the time, and you're making payments to contractors, right? So it's not a request you would think is completely crazy, but then what happens, or how the fraud happens, is, of course, there's no website. The money that's sent to you is not come out of their account because it's fraudulent. What happens, though, is the money that you send to the vendor, you don't get back. So this is what we're starting to see, and there's an increase in this. And if you're a new entrepreneur and you have a small business and you're looking to grow, if someone contacts you and says, hey, I want to pay up front, we want to do business with you, your first inclination would be, all right, this is great. My business is starting to take off. Let's go. Let's make this happen. But you have to stop, take a time out, look at this in more detail, ask a few more questions, get more information, and you'll soon realize that it's fraud.
Yeah, and I think that's the hardest thing to really look at because fraud is so covert these days.
It
You
is.
have that and it looks real. It doesn't look at somebody goes, I'm hiring you legitimately. I'm not saying do something for free. I'm going to send you money. That's
Right.
really easy.
What we found with this type of fraud, which we would call like lead generation fraud, where you think it's a real lead, but it's really not,
Right.
have multiple conversations with them and check out multiple different avenues first. And if you notice some red flags, and one of the red flags that you'll see is not very good English or just kind of inconsistencies in what they're saying. When you start to see that, then this project is not a project for you. It's probably more than likely it's fraud, and it's not going to work out.
If it's too good to be true,
If it's too good to be true,
it probably is.
that's right. And if you slow them down and you try to get them to go through your normal processes and maybe even do something like they send you a check, when the check clears the bank and the money's deposited, that sort of thing. If it sounds too good to be true, you might want to take that approach with this type of fraud.
Yeah, I had a check show up to me once. I had a $20,000 check show up. And the irony is there was no email. I just had this $20,000 check that showed up made out to the company. And I looked at the check and I was like, okay, I have a check. This is going to be fraudulent. The check looked bad anyway, as it was. You start to look at the check and you're like, this is a bogus check. I took it to the bank and I'm like, I have a bogus check. I want you to just verify that's what it is. And they looked at it and they said, oh, this check is bogus. And this specific check stock was stolen from a bank in Topeka.
Oh my gosh.
So they had already known about it. They had already known about it, and they said, well, who sent it to you? I'm like, I have no idea. There was no return address. It was just this envelope came with a check, and I'm sure it was supposed to be, hey, take this check and pay the other vendor. It just never, the email never made it to me.
And it's amazing. Banks can be really slow to respond to things like that. I mean, you would think that a bank would see that check and immediately mark it as fraud and say, you know, no, we're not even going to take this check, Len. You need to take it back. But it's not the case. In some cases, checks will be deposited and they'll have to go through a second verification with the bank before they're even seen as fraud. So while all that's happening, money can change hands.
And if you put that check in your bank, the other piece of it is even on a smaller amount, let's say it's $1,000, you put that small amount into your bank, if you've got the money in your account, they go ahead and cash it and they say those funds are good.
That's right.
And so what happens is you've taken that check in, they've cashed the check in good faith. And if they go back and say it's a fraudulent account, you have to pay that back.
That's
and
right.
If you've already given money out, then you are behind.
That's exactly right. And this is happening more and more because of web marketing, because we're marketing now internationally. You know, a few years ago before the web, this company would have never found you, or this individual would have never found you. But now you're on the web, you know, Intuitive Websites is on the web. We're out there. And people can find us in you know, Eastern Europe or wherever these places are coming from. So we're responsible for that protection. Now on the e-commerce side, it's much more common. In fact, because so many sites now are basically taking the place of retail stops or shops and retail stores, we have to really see e-commerce fraud as another form of shoplifting. And e-commerce fraud on e-commerce sites can be as simple as someone has a stolen credit card and they're trying to buy something. Well, you know, stolen credit cards can get stopped pretty quickly or get found or flagged, but someone could use a credit card that's not stolen, purchase something from you, and then claim they never received it, or claim that it came defective and they want another one. And then when you send them the other one, they never send a good. I mean, so there's lots of ways for this to happen. And I think the important thing to realize is that it may be a cost of you doing business. In some cases, you may not be able to get that fraudulent order replaced. But if you can prevent it, or if the order looks too good to be true, you can make a call and maybe get payment up front or something like that. Explain to the customer this is not returnable.
There's also controls. There's also controls you can put in place for saying somebody didn't receive it. It's like, no, I shipped it via FedEx or UPS. Here is your signature. This
Absolutely.
is so. Then there are some controls. Now it costs a little bit more. There's others, you know. But once again, like you said, there is a cost of doing business.
That's right. And fraud may now be a cost of doing business, especially for larger e-commerce sites. And, you know, when you think about it, in the old days of the retail store, you had shoplifting, and shoplifting was a cost, but people found ways to prevent that and keep it down. So fraud is an issue, but an even bigger issue, really, in many ways, is website hacks, website hacking, and we don't know why many cases people hack websites. We try to figure that out. A lot of times, it seems to be some kind of odd promotion for their company in some weird way. Like, for example, Chinese websites will hack US websites with content on them, lots of content on them. And if you do the reverse engineering on the IP addresses, they're coming from hosting websites in China. So that, I mean, it's just a weird thing. But some of the common hacks that we've seen happen on websites with large files. So if you have a website and you have a lot of files on your websites, PDFs or videos, audio files, be careful, because there are spiders that go out and find those files and then will hack your site. Once again, not sure why they hack it. I guess they see it as a target, but you can store files and information off of your domain and embed them in your domain. The most classic example is the video we're doing right now will be put on YouTube and will be embedded in our website. It won't be a file on our website. Also, probably the number one thing you can do to prevent hacking of your website is make sure you use a very hard to decipher password, and that you change your passwords on a regular basis, because that still is the number one way that people hack your site. They have a password detection program. They find the password, they use it to hack your WordPress site or whatever. And when they hack your site, they may do very strange things too that you won't expect. Like, for example, they may just plant a piece of code on your site that will stay there for weeks and weeks, and then one day will start displaying really weird meta descriptions, or will delete certain pages and replace them with an ad for Viagra or something like that. So it's kind of hard to see. That one of the things we tell our clients to do is make sure that every day or every week, someone is pulling up your website and looking at your website so you can see what's actually being displayed on web pages. And it's even a good idea to do a search for your website and see what comes up in the meta descriptions. Sometimes these hacks can be fixed. We recommend that your website's backed up at least on a weekly basis, if not more often. But what can happen to a website is it can be hacked. The backup of the website that's hacked can be reinstalled. And if that starts to happen, unless you can go back to core files, you have to scrap the site and start all over. So it really comes down to prevention through attention, right? Giving your site attention and watching it, so that if it is hacked, you know, well, it's been hacked, that happened yesterday. Let's go remove the files, restore from backup, and then we have a clean website again. So like I said, it becomes part of your process of web marketing, something to watch out for.
I do want to go back and touch on it from the big guys. You know, let's talk about the Targets and the Home Depots, and when they got the hacks. And obviously the big thing is the sensitive information, the credit card numbers and information that's stored from all of the customers at those retailers. I had the opportunity to talk with a consulting firm a couple months ago that was involved with the Target issues, and they did some consulting with them. And some of the things that came up were that it was not Target. Target had a rock solid infrastructure for security to keep hackers out. What happened was there was a third-party contractor that came in, and happened to be an HVAC company that came in, and the way the hackers were able to get in was through an infected computer from this HVAC company that happened to get connected into Target's infrastructure and into their intranet.
It's a great point, and I
think that's where the big thing is who else has access to your network? It might be your core staff that you have. Core staff is dialed in, and you have all the security measures that you need, but what other people are accessing your network?
It's a great point. And for us and most of the clients we work with, most of the listeners to this podcast, it's basically who has access to my WordPress website, who has access to the admin login of my WordPress website, and what computers are they coming from to work on this site. Because if they have an infected computer, they log in, that login is registered by a spammer hacker, and then boom, you're in trouble. So you've got to make sure that anyone working on your website has a clean system. And the larger your organization gets, the more these protocols become important. For the average entrepreneur, for small business, you've got to manage it yourself and stay on top of it. but you can be as big as the Wall Street Journal or United Airlines and have, you have glitches and things like that that happen from your connections with other resources. So it's actually a very, very good point.
And if you don't have an internal, and this is probably a good plug for IT companies, if you don't have a great IT infrastructure with your company, it may not be a bad idea to pick up the phone and call some of these external IT companies that kind of are the IT division for small business, and have them come take a look at what you're doing and how you can make your security tighter, because they might have some other ideas to shore up your systems.
It's a great point, because as you get more involved in web marketing, your company grows, you need an IT partner, because the whole IT world now starts to be involved in this fraud protection, hacking protection. And if your website goes down, it can be an enormous loss for your company. And probably the biggest threat, the biggest loss that can happen is having to rebuild that website from scratch if you don't have a backup, especially if you have a WordPress site and you have hundreds of blog posts and all this other content and so forth. That would all have to be redone. So make sure you back up your site.
And back up your, on WordPress, not only backing up all the files, but backing up the database.
That's right, absolutely.
Which is another thing. It's fairly easy to do. But Tom, what are the action items for our viewers and listeners?
Well, I think that this has to be a culture in your company. So as you grow your business, whether you're one person right now or 100 or more, there has to be a culture of watching out for what might be a fraud order and having systems in place for that, or for fraud inquiry, and then also having very tight IT and web hosting and web marketing structures around preventing the website from being hacked. The last thing you want to do is have this happen and then have it be a learning experience, because then you've got to figure out how to deal with it and start from scratch. Have a backup plan for your website, change your passwords on a regular basis, and know who and what people are doing on your website, how they're accessing it, and so forth. At some point, if your website gets to be large enough, you probably want it to stop having off-site people that have not been verified making changes and updates to your website. So all these things work together, but I think really the bottom line is being aware of it, having preventative measures in place, and having a culture in your company among your IT and marketing group that you're going to watch out for this stuff and take it seriously, and then I think you'll prevent it.
Yeah. Well, wonderful, folks. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll look forward to seeing you on our next podcast. Have a great day.